I don't usually identify myself as Christian and white. First of all, I'm no longer practicing in the faith I was raised in, but I only did that actually because I was saying it in sort of solidarity with the caller who called and sort of said, I'm an old white guy. I mean, that was the only reason I did it. I agree with you that the issue is very important, and that sort of brings me to what I came to the show to talk about, which was not Muhammad or Islam, but the issue of freedom of speech about Palestine, Israeli policy, Palestinians, about all of this, and particularly the importance and the need for it in America, and the contrast really with London, which here is the country that we came from, our quote-unquote founding fathers came from. And what was so striking to me as going over to London, where people speak English, the Blair government and the Bush government are hand in hand, and yet throughout every level of society, there is so much more freedom of expression around this issue. I was frankly quite shocked by it.
So what you're saying here? I thought America is the god of the freedom of expression.
No,
in comparison to London, you're saying we're not.
No, in fact, I said to many of the British people I met there, you are way ahead of us on this issue, and you are going to pull us back to our Constitution. I mean, I really felt that the British people, I'm not talking about Tony Blair or Gordon Brown or anybody in the government, but the British people themselves were actually going to bring America back to itself. That's how I felt when I was over there.
Can you give examples? What makes the British really more into the freedom of expression?
Sure, I most certainly can. Every London daily, when I was over there, had dissenting articles about the government and about the war in Iraq. Every day. In terms of the Israeli-Palestinian issue, it is possible to be a columnist in a London daily and to write about it in a fair and balanced way. And the most important thing that you realize when you walk the streets of London, you read the media, you listen to the TV, you talk to British people, is that they realize there are at least two sides to this conflict and not one.
So what happened in America? I'm serious. This is fascinating because the difference between Washington and London. I want to talk about the freedom of speech here.
Well, let me ask you.
What happened really?
Well, let me ask you this: do you feel that you have less freedom than you had, say, before 9/11 to speak about? After all, you are Palestinian American. And America is based on the right of representation. Do you feel that you have less freedom to represent yourself as a Palestinian American, to identify yourself that way, as well as to talk about Palestine?
Well, I'm sure there is a lot of limitations. There's no doubt. You know, I think with the situation after 9/11, it's very clear that any Muslim actually that is Muslim, you know, automatically if you are Muslim, you are labeled. You don't have to say anything. So can you imagine if you say something? So definitely.
Okay, can I ask you this? Yeah. If you're Muslim and you're not Palestinian, let's say you're a native-born white American Muslim.
Like my kids.
Like your kids, or like some, let's say I became a Muslim and let's say I converted to Islam. Do you think I would be freer to speak about Palestinians than you?
Well, my situation is worse than yours. I will be 100% labeled whatever I say. You will be somehow labeled.
Right.
Automatically being a white American, this is your passport.
And especially, let's say, if I didn't wear the headscarf, which identifies
it's worse.
me. Yes.
Exactly, it's worse. But going back to the question of London and the U.S., why? I mean, seriously, is it fear? Is somebody in control of the media? Is it fear? Is it the government? Or is it on top of?
I've been thinking about that nonstop since I
really?
got back, and there are many answers to that question. There's not one answer. This is a complicated question, but a couple of things I would say. First, in Britain, there is a separation of church and state.
We have the same thing?
No, we don't. Not in the same way. In Britain, civil society, as political scientists call it, and the government do not ultimately refer to God. Now, it's true the British say God save the Queen, but the emphasis is on save the Queen. It's not on God. Because there is a line between church and state, there is not this notion that you hear in America. You hear this all the time about America being a quote-unquote Judeo-Christian culture, or we have Judeo-Christian values. The British don't talk this way, even though, in fact, our Protestant churches, or at least our mainstream ones, came from Britain. And in fact, the British even proselytized differently on the street. I was on the streets in London. The Salvation Army was there. They said a few things about their faith, but mostly what they did is they have this great brass band that plays music.
Amazing.
They don't come up to you and wave the Bible in your face.
Is it the culture? I mean, you know,
It's a more intellectual
British,
culture,
they
yes.
have roots. You know, I'm sure when you have roots, you have embedded culture.
It's that, yes, I think some of it is that. They are confident of themselves as British. They're not spending, they don't have British studies departments in their university. They don't spend a lot of their time saying, what does it mean to be British? Now, it is true that they are facing certain issues around multiculturalism because of immigration. It's not that there isn't racism in Britain. There is. But they have different vehicles for dealing with it. And the most important thing is they don't sit around talking about the fact that being British is a question of being Judeo-Christian. They don't use those categories for talking about citizenship. They don't use religion in the way Americans do.
I do have a lot of callers. I'm going to come back to that point, Dr. Gordon. Greg, good evening.
Yes, good evening, folks.
Hi.
Dr. Gordon, I think maybe you need to go back to Britain and live there because you say that Judeo-Christian, which I took it you went away from a Christian religion.
I didn't go away from it. I'm just not practicing the same religion I was raised in. That's a different thing.
You need to go back.
Well, if I went back, actually, if I went back to the Catholic Church, which is...
No, don't go back to the Catholic Church, an apostate church.
Well, I was raised as a Catholic, and I always understood Catholicism to be a kind of Christianity.
Hey, Greg, do you have a question for us?
Well, you let me talk for a few minutes. I know you don't want to hear me, Mr. Stom.
No, I just would like to talk to as many callers. In fact, I want to encourage callers to call in.
It's 60 seconds yet.